So I'm Simona Livescu. Most of you know me. I'm the director of the Center for American Studies at the Romanian American University here in Bucharest. And we're welcoming today Dr. Monica Cure and also Dr. Catinca Tabacaru. And a few words about Dr. Cure, and after that, Dr. Cure will introduce our guest speaker today. So Monica Cure is a Romanian American writer, literary translator, and dialogue specialist. With over 15 years of interdisciplinary teaching experience in universities in the US and abroad, Dr. Cure has developed a question-based philosophy and methodology of dialogue that she terms collective dialogue. She has lent her skills as a dialogue specialist internationally to organizations such as the Goethe Institute, the Los Angeles Change Collab, and the US Embassy in Romania. And she is also the founder of Exchanging Words. She's a two-time Fulbright grantee and the winner of the 2023 Oxford Weidenfeld Translation Prize. Thank you, Dr. Cure, and welcome you and also our guest speaker today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And tonight I am so pleased to introduce Catinca Tabacaru. Catinca earned a BA from the University of California, Berkeley in 2003, and her juris doctorate and master's in international law from Duke University in 2007. She spent her graduate school years working for the UN International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda and the Office of the Chief Defense Counsel for military commissions at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. In 2014, she founded Catinca Tabacaru Gallery in Manhattan. And in 2017, the gallery built its second location in Harare, Zimbabwe. In 2020, the gallery moved its primary exhibition space from New York City to Bucharest. It was the instigator and is a co-founder of Rad Art Fair in Bucharest, with Catinca Tabacaru currently acting as co-artistic director since its inaugural edition in 2023. And also of Doi Joi, a second Thursdays program started in Bucharest in 2020. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Catinca.
Thank you, Monica. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, I mean, especially because you just had an amazing second edition of Rad Art Fair, which is so much work, but I was able to go and it was amazing. So congratulations for that as well.
Thank you. I'm still not unraveled from it all, so we're still dealing with a lot, but
I'm sure.
It was beyond all expectations. So.
No. Well, tonight we'll unravel kind of also in time and maybe kind of unravel some of your process that has been so successful and so innovative, especially for this space here in Romania and Bucharest. And I thought I would start off by asking you, as I have previous guests as well, to talk a little bit about your journey. And from your bio, it becomes really clear that you have done and could have done many, many different things. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your journey, especially moving from law and such, important human rights contexts and moving into fine art and the gallery world. So I'd love to just hear from you about how that happened and what that was like for you.
Well, I like to think I'm still living those lives in some parallel universes. Change is something that takes a decision. It's obviously, it takes some courage, it takes some stupidity, but it essentially just takes a decision. And I remember the day I essentially decided that law was no longer the path I wanted to be on. It had been amazing. Law school was a brilliant place and it was great fun and I grew a lot and I had a lot of hands-on experience. I was able to build a lot of programs there. I was very kind of, disillusioned with the law school world and with all of these brilliant, brilliant people. Duke is a top 10 school in America. And all we did was just sit around and study stuff and write a lot for grades. And that seemed really nonsensical to me. And so that was kind of, I think, the beginning of my creation process within a community, which was that I just decided I wasn't good enough. And I ended up building 2 clinics in the law world. Clinics essentially means that law students couple up with a professor, with a practicing lawyer, and they can do real work.
So I joined the HIV clinic, which Duke, like many American universities, is a very wealthy university in a very poor town. And this poor town was full of crack addicted, people who needed a lot of help, and they were wonderful, and kind of their situations were perpetuated by upbringing and by community. And so the students at Duke would essentially take on cases. They had to do with addiction, with insurance, with child custody, and we would run these cases through the courts, and our case, then our patients, our clients essentially would end up with much better representation. And then we did that, and then I started also a criminal law clinic because that was what interested me the most. And we had a criminal detainee who was serving a life sentence, and he was serving a life sentence for essentially a nonviolent crime. But because in America you compound things on top of each other, he happened to have had 2 other excursions with the law before, and then he happened to have drugs and a gun on him, and he ran away from the police. So somehow this turned into a 30-year prison sentence, even though he'd done really nothing. And so my proud moment of that is that I left behind a legacy, and that clinic is still ongoing at Duke, and it's become much bigger since. So then I do all of this wonderful work, and I go on and work for the UN and work in a genocide tribunal, and I defend clients who are considered terrorists at Guantanamo Bay. And then something strikes me that maybe New York would be a lot more adventurous, and the money sounded good. And so I go to New York instead of continuing this human rights work, and I work for a law firm. And after just a little under 2 years, I just realized that there was nothing feeding my soul. I went from dealing with life affecting things and humans and thinking about the law as something that can really change the world, into fighting over who's going to get the Lehman, money, and who's going to protect Glencore when the price of oil changes. And this felt very empty to me. And so I made a decision, and I essentially decided 2-year mark, I quit, and I will just do something else. I didn't get to the 2-year mark because a month before my 2-year mark, I got fired. And I got fired because I was given an ultimatum, which was stop doing pro bono work. I was doing a lot of things on the side, like helping child abduction cases and doing asylum work, and some old lady that the bank was taking advantage of and trying to steal her apartment. And this was really fun. And the law firm was like, well, you either stop doing that and work more billable hours, or we'd have to ask you to leave. And I was like, well, getting fired is better than quitting because you get paid for 3 months. So sweet. But because I was a lawyer, and because being a lawyer in New York is very, the compensation's very good, I did have quite a bit of money on hand. And this was actually very helpful as well, because I was able to step out, and while it was frightening, I wasn't, I was safe. I had a home, I had time. And so I just started doing everything. I kept doing some interesting law cases. I spoke to all my friends and told them, I'm a free agent. I don't want to do law. I'm not looking for a law job. You guys know me well enough, so I'm looking for whatever you think I would like. I also started thinking a lot about what I was good at, and essentially I came up with the answers that I was a good writer, and I was good at art. And so I followed those 2 paths. I wrote a book, which was a terrible book. I don't recommend it to anyone. And then I also started volunteering for an art gallery, which then very quickly, and I won't go through the entire process, but over the next 4 years, every time I would do an art project, somebody would be very impressed, and 2 other opportunities would come out of it. So really, I grew on itself.
So when you just really quick, when you say you were you knew you were a good writer, and you knew you were good at art. When you say you were good at art, you're not necessarily an artist yourself, but it's something where you can speak about art, you can recognize good art. Where were you at the time?
I believe one of my parallel lives is as a documentary photographer.
Okay.
So even in law school, I'd always been very interested in photography. I'd
Mhm.
spent my high school in the dark room. I'd taken art classes in college. In law school, I was part of the documentary photography center. So it was always this, like many people maybe in this group as well, I come from a Romanian family. Art was never within the realm of like possibilities of a career for me. It was always an interest or a hobby. I hadn't even thought about potentially doing that, right? Like it's not a very Eastern thing, or what, or wasn't at the time. We're of a certain age at this point. And also I was an immigrant child, like my immigrant parents weren't like, hey, go be an artist, go be a photographer. Maybe they would have been, honestly. I was just pretty intent on changing the world, And
And you were very strategic as well. You were very conscious of, I need to have a sustainable life. I need to be making enough money as well. So I see that in your story. You had both concerns, both, what's meaningful, but also what's doable and practical and I can excel at.
very much. And earning money for me was always a point of pride.
Mhm.
I think, even when I didn't need to. So I do come from a family that was sort of the mentality, as long as you're studying and doing well in school, we will support you. But that wasn't really the point for me. So in high school, I actually had to fight my family because I wanted to get a job and I wanted to go and backpack around Europe like every other 18-year-old. But I did work for my last year of high school in a restaurant, which was the most fun. All my friends were 10 years older and taught me about wine. But it felt really good. I would earn this money as a 17-year-old, and I would take half of it and I would put away for my European trip. And I would take a quarter of it and put it away for visiting my boyfriend that lived in the US. I was in Canada. And then a quarter of it I would spend. I was very like kind of systematic with my boxes and my drawer.
Yeah.
But it is something that was always part of who I was. And so it always felt like a responsibility, kind of this like self-keep. Yeah, I mean, that's all I have to
Yeah,
kind of
no, that's great. So then how did the idea of opening your own gallery come about?
So in 2012, I had spent, so I stopped being a lawyer at the end of 2019. Come 2012, I have a rickety law practice that's making me nervous because I'm quite good at what I do, but if I make a mistake, it's all on me. I have a non-for-profit organization focused on women's rights in the Middle East. This is very good, but takes up a lot of my energy, and I'm starting to feel like maybe it's not my place in the world. I have a curatorial practice going where I'm getting invited to curate shows, and I all of a sudden in those 2-3 years have built a group of artists who I'm working with consistently, so essentially becoming a gallery. So I have these kind of like 4 things. I bet you I was doing other stuff too. I was studying for the GREs to go like get a curatorial degree or something else that was in my brain. And so I was doing a ton of stuff. And I remember one of the artists I was working with was also a brilliant woman. And she looked at me and she said, Catinca, you're so good at so many things. Imagine what would happen if you did one. And that really clicked, because I think I was feeling it too. Like I was also feeling quite spread. And so slowly but surely, I just started giving things up, right? So I gave up being a lawyer and I said, it's not going to be my path. It was nice to make money while I was trying to be an artist, but I'm not going to do it. And then willingly or unwillingly, I gave up the nonprofit. Yet again, a situation where I essentially got fired. I get fired a lot. I don't have very good upward management. But in this case, again, for something I was proud of, which was that I was way too liberal and way too left wing for this super right wing or, board that had been created around this thing. And then so I kind of like move forward and I'm a little more focused and I continue on both the curatorial and the gallery path. And in 2013, 13 or 14, I take the GREs, I do well enough. I apply to the Appel, which is one of the famous kind of international curatorial programs, and they don't take me. And so I keep moving forward. And during this time, as I'm building within the art world, I'm kind of growing And I, like I said, from one thing comes to another. I even started doing art fairs. And by the end of 2013, I do Pulse in Miami and sell out on the first day with an artist named Justin Orvis-Steimer. And we're pretty happy, as you can imagine. We're like, woohoo! And I realized that I need a gallery. All of a sudden, I have a group of artists. I've done fairs, and there's also nowhere else to go. So talking a little bit about these like kind of ceilings that I think are important or steps that you take in your life. You know, I got to this point where there was just no way for me to climb as a gallery unless I opened a permanent space, right? So I always think about that moment as like, I never really wanted a gallery. I actually needed a gallery. And so come 2014, I mean, I fuck off to Costa Rica for a month beforehand, and that was amazing. But then I come back to New York and get busy and find a space and get the keys on my birthday in April. And by May, I've opened a gallery. And of course, as the universe works, by June, I am invited to join the Pell curatorial program.
Wow.
And then we come back to this like decision moment, right? Lots of forks in the road. So decision moment again, do I shut this gallery that, you know, I had just opened? So no big deal, no huge investment, but I had just opened it, and go and do this very intellectual, high elite program? Or do I kind of like stay in the trenches, Lower East Side, there's rats everywhere, 50-meter space with my artists? Obviously, I stay in the Lower East Side. And so I kind of give up the like educational dream in it with the pride that I got in the second year. And I opened this gallery. And for 5.5 years in New York, I just make it up. I am an immigrant, but not really an immigrant because my accent is great. I am a woman, I'm young. I have all of these things bubbled up, and and the main thing is I don't come from the art world, right? Most people who open up a gallery either worked for a big gallery first, they have their black book they leave with and all that experience, or they went to Yale art school and they have the whole circle of people around them, and they have, I just kind of opened the gallery. And this has its pros and cons. The pros being that I just get to do whatever I want. It's full creation mode. And what results, you know, now we're 10 years later. The gallery just turned 10, actually. Forgot to celebrate again, but we will, because there's big news on the horizon. But I just invent, right? And this is a really magical moment too, where when you do something that you have very little formal education in, or very little formal training in, you get to kind of rewrite things. I think I would be a very different gallery had I gone to Pell. Had I worked for a big gallery first instead of just doing it all on my own, I would have been a very different type of program. And again, I would have maybe moved. There's pros and cons, but it's certainly a lot more fun to just do it my way.
Yeah.
And it has resulted, I think, in recognition as being quite different from others of my peers.
Yeah. And that's kind of where I wanted to go next. I mean, one of the things that's so surprising, you know, when you look at, you know, where the gallery has moved to Zimbabwe and now Bucharest. I mean, do you think if you had gone to this kind of traditional path of, you know, following in the footsteps of these other gallerists, do you think you would have ever opened up galleries there and here?
Probably not. I don't want to take myself completely out of it. I think character, just like an artist, an art piece is if it's well done, is a reflection of the character of the artist. I think a gallery is really a reflection of the gallerist. And so I don't want to say, oh my God, I would have done something boring just because I had training. That's not quite it. I think what I would have probably done is made some smarter decisions at the beginning. It might have not taken me so long, although now that I look at it, it didn't actually take me very long, but at the time it felt like it was taking me a really long time to get there, you know. I think I don't know the answer if I would have done those things. I like to say yes.
Yeah, I think, you know, just hearing your story, you achieved success in these different ways, and you know, at some point you keep talking about hitting the ceiling. You know, maybe at some point you had been like, okay, I did this thing, you know, I'm very successful in New York, but there's something that's missing. So tell us a little bit about Zimbabwe and then Bucharest. How did you come to the realization that something was missing and that for that something you had to leave New York?
I didn't. I left New York for a random reason and realized there was just more here. So the Zimbabwe happened because when I did open up that gallery in 2014, I said, I'm not a gallery that's going to have 4 walls and put some art on the walls. Like, I don't want to be, the most important thing in me, I think, as a being is freedom. And so the last thing you want is to close me between these 4 walls. And so, of course, since I opened the gallery in 2014, by 2015, I was taking my artists and we were traveling to Zimbabwe and building some sort of crazy thing that we ended up building there over the next 4 years, 5 years. And that was it was a call. I'm not sure what our audience is like and what the students are like, but I am quite aware, and I watch quite closely the path, the river, whatever your system of beliefs is, whether it's spiritual or religious, or like, I don't know what each person's is, but we all have some kind of vision, something that is showing us what the future might hold, or whether something is right or not. And so one of the things that I've always done is tried, not always successfully, but tried to notice if I'm hitting my head against the wall. You know, I want something so bad, but it's just not going to happen, you know? Or if I'm doing something I might not want so badly, but it's just going so well, you know? And those are very important notes, right? There's a nice, I forget where I read it, but there was a very nice visual at one point of like, life is a river. You're going to go with it. Your job is just to kind of avoid boulders so you don't get hit or stuck. So just navigate the river that's already happening. And so that's quite a bit of what I do. And so with something like Zimbabwe, you know, a few things happened in my life. Zimbabwe seemed like a great place to go. So we went. I tend to have this quality too, where there is a leadership quality in me. So people tend to be like, that's a great idea. We'll go with you. Which is great because there's no leader without, you know, friends. And so we were able to do a lot. And then when we got to Zimbabwe, it turned out that they were always waiting for us, say their shaman. It turned out that we were able to do a lot there, both for us and for them. The us and them very quickly disappeared, and it became really communal. It became very collective. And there was such a kind of equal value exchange between the groups that it became, you know, a lot of love developed. So much love that we ended up having 2 marriages out of the whole thing, which one is still going, and the other moved on.
Maybe I still want to know. I mean, again, this sounds like so fabulous. You know, you are someone, you know, on the other, you know, maybe not quite the other side of the world, but far away in New York. Well, who was your first contact in Zimbabwe? How did this gallery project first make that contact in Zimbabwe, which again, you know, for those of our students or people listening, you know, maybe they're thinking, oh, I would love to do something in X country, maybe for personal reasons, but, you know, from like, I'm interested in this country to here's this project. And then, as you were saying here, it's really going well. I mean, what do you identify as that spark? Was it a person? Was it an opportunity?
It's the recognition of these signs. So it was, you know, if you're doing your job in your life, things will happen. So I was doing my job. All of a sudden I decided I was going to have this gallery and I was going to do this art world thing. So I have to go to the Venice Biennial. Otherwise, what am I doing? Right. And so I go to the Venice Biennial, but I have all this background working in Rwanda and in Tanzania. So obviously I'm going to seek out the 2 African pavilions.
Right.
2013 at this point. Might have been only one. No, I think there were 2. Might have been 1. So anyways, I find the Zimbabwe pavilion and I fall in love with an artist I'm still to this day chasing. But when she just finds out what happened, I think she'll come. So, you know, 11 years later, I'm still trying to work with this artist. And so I find her and it just gets imprinted on my brain. 2 years later, I've opened the gallery. Things are kind of cool. And I go to the Venice Biennial again. And again, I'm so excited for the Zimbabwe pavilion. It's the first place we go. These guys are still installing. Another artist I fall in love with. And so I fall into conversation with the curator who remembers me from the year before somehow. And I tell him how we absolutely have to come to Zimbabwe. And he's like, okay,
Heard this before, maybe.
and then in June, I go to Basel again, you have to be present and you have to follow these dreams and do your work in them. I go to Basel and I find him and I was like, we're coming to Zimbabwe. He's like, you know what? You seem pretty serious. And if you're telling me this, everybody expects Africans to come to the West to participate, right? The river always goes that way. If you're willing to come kind of counter river, I will help you. And so he connected me to who is still our partner there, Chikonzero Chakunzuru. Chico is his name. And Chico is this amazing artist and human. He has an art center who all of the big kind of Zimbabwean artists have been through. That's where they all raised. That's where they developed their practices. And his partner in the art center is a shaman. So then the vibe of this entire thing is that it lives in real traditional terms. So even though Chico is a Venice biennial artist, he lives quite close to the earth and close to its ancestral laws. So then we connect and we go down there not knowing anything. We just have a plan. I'm not sure what plan we had, but we were going to make a plan. And Chico, I talked to Chico from the Hamptons in my bathing suit. It was like winter there. And we set this whole up. I tell him when we're coming. He says, come on down. We're waiting for you guys. And he really does his job as a partner, right? We arrive one day and the second day he has kind of given the news that we are coming, these foreigners, these art foreigners are coming, and invites all of the contemporary artists and the kind of the contemporary art scene from Harare to come meet us. And so we have this amazing, it's imprinted in my brain, this like, kind of, we just have like drinks and hang out for an hour. And then we all sit in a circle. And it was, the foreigners were myself, Rafi, who's the director of my gallery now. At the time, I think she was still an intern. And then 3 artists, an American, Russian, Israeli. She's having a tough time right now. And a Surinamese artist, most of whom I think you've met. You've met 2 of these. And so we're sitting, these 5 white kids at a round table with maybe like 20 local artists and art cultural creators, let's call it. And I think everybody comes in there expecting to have this like us and them conversation. And it takes maybe half an hour of everyone going around and talking about their art practice to realize that literally we're all of similar generations, of similar concerns. We are all really going in the same direction. And that created an incredible closeness immediately. And we spent the next, we created, we did a call, everybody did presentations, we chose 10 artists, and we ended up having like a 15 artist residency there for a month, where everybody lived together, worked together, produced an exhibition at the end, which was then invited back to the National Gallery of Zimbabwe, and I went back and curated the next year.
That's amazing. Yeah. I just want to point out, I feel like there are several things already that are kind of solidifying. You've said several times, and I think this is, to the question of how you're finding your people, you're very intuitive in your process. I mean, that is one. But part of that is also seeing where is that connection, where can I already start to see there's no us and them, that we're already on that same page. And that's really crucial, both to, starting something new, but then of course, what you can build together after that.
I think, there's a lot of answers there. One thing I will say, because if you kind of, we're still talking about me 10 years ago, I will say it's harder today, because I think that the more you climb, the windier it gets. And so I think it's, and this is very important because we are speaking to a group of students. And I think it's very important, like the place where you guys are right now is a really, really great place to create connections and to create, it's very horizontal right now, right? And when I say create connections, I don't mean like those things that are going to help you network later. I mean, not only the connections that might stay with you, but also like the practice of creating these connections. Because it's not easy. So I talk about Zimbabwe as this like magical, amazing place. Week 3, we were in tears with like knives at each other's throat, ready to leave and never see each other again, you know, and so it requires that, right? Like relationships are a process, and they often go through very, not just difficult, but like very difficult moments. I think the best relationships essentially have to get through some very difficult times. And so this idea of kind of like not seeing us and them, this too is a decision, right? You know, some of it is intuitive. We have chemistry with certain people. But it's also a decision of treating people equally and of learning certain things, you know. I don't know how many people in this group have been to Africa, and I don't know how people in this group think about it, but the tendency is to have an us and them when you think about West or Africa, white, Black, poor, rich. You know, these are dichotomies that really, really persist. And so there's such a tendency to sit in them, right? But that's not really what makes us different, right? Like money, age, color, that's not what makes us different. What makes us different essentially are our ethics. That's what really divides people. And so if you can kind of understand that, and you can understand that, you know, your circle is not made by appearances, but it's made to these common goals, common ethics, through love, through fun. You know, one of the things I really learned in Zimbabwe, I remember the 3rd or 4th year we were there, we got scolded by the shaman because he'd been gone and we'd been there for a week, and we had like kind of like hit the ground running. We were working really hard. We had this like goal we had to meet. And the shaman gets back and kind of does his like, you know, thing. He brings in the Sakuru, who is the master spirit. And Sakuru just starts scolding us and like, what are you doing here? You haven't thrown a party, you haven't drank together, you haven't danced. How do you expect anyone to do anything you want, you know? And he was right, you know, and 2 days later we gave this big party and the whole community came together and everybody had a great time, and all of a sudden like all this work and heaviness lifted. And so to come back to your question of how do you figure out otherness, I think the best thing is probably to assume nobody is another until they show you that they are, until they show you that you can't trust them, until they show you that their interests are completely different, until you realize you have nothing in common with them. I think if you're open to the person and the group's like reality, your life will just be better. You're going to have more surprises. You're going to have cooler friends. You're going to do better things. It's very dangerous, I think, to stay closed into one mentality or one group or one race or one religion, whatever, you know.
So let's move to Bucharest now, because you did it again. You know, you're in Zimbabwe, doing these amazing things, and you know, you moved to Bucharest. And I know part of it was for personal reasons, for love. But you get here, and I feel like you also hit the ground running. You know, what was your thought process once you're like, okay, I'm moving to Bucharest, I'm going to be here. What are you thinking you want to do in the art world here?
It wasn't so intended. So I never moved to Bucharest. I just came to hang out for a little while. I just never left. I think, you know, New York is one of these places. I spent 12 years in New York, and it's one of these places where some people will outlive a decade, but most of us, you just kind of get done with it. And that's the feeling I was having. I was having this feeling of being on this hamster wheel. I was at the top of the world, and I was starting to get recognition as well after these kind of years put in as a outsider. And I was realizing that my life was becoming this like kind of constant, put up a show, work on press, do the sales, put up another show, work on press, do the sales, try to move up to the art fair world. It became quite formulaic, and I was starting to understand the formula. And it didn't look very fun. It was a lot of how I felt when I didn't want to be a lawyer anymore. You could see, if I could see a path that just, I was good at it, but it wasn't very fun. And New York started to feel that way, but I had no reason to leave, because how do you leave the top of the world? And so the universe gave me a hand, brought me Prince Charming, and I met my now husband. And my now husband was in Bucharest. He'd been here for 6 years, because he did his medical school here. He's half Romanian. And he grew up outside, but he did university here. And so, you know, I thought, well, I need a break. I was burnt out. I was exhausted. Like, there was just no, and the space in New York that I had on the Lower East Side was just a bit too small. Like, I had how much can you do in 55 meters? I did a lot. But I was ready to grow. I was growing as a business, as a gallery. So I was like, okay, let me close this up. I'll go to Romania for 5-6 months, whatever. We'll try to make a baby. You know, he'll close up his thing that he has here, and then we'll figure it out. We'll see if we go to New York. We'll see if we go to Paris. We'll see if we go to Berlin. We'll see if we go to Brussels. Those are the options, you know, like now I recognize it. I didn't have it at the time. I had it in a different way, but now I kind of laugh at, you know, if you're Romanian, you're probably like moving soon. This is disappearing a bit, which is nice, but I think it's a general pursuit. And so we lived in that space of, let's not do anything permanent because we're going to leave soon for a couple of years. But essentially I didn't leave because COVID was so good here. So I spent a few months here and then went to New York, got a new space, a new big space, but didn't sign the contract. And I was at the Armory, which you have to remember was, I opened the space February 28th, 2020. And I came home after the Armory show. The Armory is like the big New York week for art. And I came home March 9th. And by March 18th, I was at Balch, imprisoned, very angry, which was my own process, this whole COVID thing. But COVID
stuck in the hospital. That's
forced in a hospital and kept held down by threats of prison. But it, you know, getting pulled out from the world for 11 days and having to go through that does something to your brain as well. And there's a lot of like peace that comes at the end. And then COVID in Romania, I think a lot of us know, was sweet, right? Like May 16th, I was in Mamaia at Nuba, no problem. Versus my friends in the West, in New York, were stuck inside, versus my friends and family in Canada were locked up for 2 years. You know, Romania started shining a bit, right? There was no reason, there's no reason to leave during COVID, but there was no reason to leave because all of a sudden there was something percolating here that was correct. And then I, you know, obviously naturally had already started to get to know the art world. I got deeper and deeper into the art world here. And then as time passed, I also started panicking that I didn't have a space. You know, I was still like building this career. The gallery was doing very well in theory, but here we all stuck on our Zoom calls. And so I opened up a space in Bucharest in order to not lose pace. And then the story goes on. There's so much to do here. And I think that, you know, the question is why did you move here? The better question is, I think, why did you stay? Because that's what I did. I stayed, I didn't move. And I stayed because I found a level of purpose here that I couldn't have somewhere else. New York is very saturated. It's very noisy. It has all these formulas of how you grow and what success means. And in Romania, it was like being in the jungle. You know, I could do anything.
You know, it's really striking me. You know, I think when I was thinking about, you know, what might be the way to frame, you know, all your amazing experiences, I think for many people, you know, the thought of, you know, entering a new market or really creating a new market is very daunting. Whereas what I'm hearing in your story is that's what's actually exciting to you. So it kind of starts with like, no, like there is something here to do. And then you kind of, maybe at the same time find the people you can do it with, or maybe after, and you kind of are saying, here's what I want to do, and that attracts people, the right people? How would you put that?
I think it's recognizing things in people. So when I first opened the gallery here, you know, I had become friends with a few of the gallerists, a few of the artists, and but I also started panicking, right? Because who's gonna come to Romania and see what I'm doing? Like, am I gonna do this for the 100 people that at the time were frequenting the art galleries? And so, but when I panic, I usually problem solve. And so my thought was, well, nobody's gonna come here for me, but they might come if there's like 10 of us.
Mm.
And so I called up my gallery friends and I was like, hey, you guys want to do something together? And in the middle of the pandemic, we did something called Video Radio Live, which is I was really into the idea in the pandemic that showing art that nobody could see was stupid, and showing paintings on screens was stupid. So what about showing art that was made for the screen?
Mm.
And so I proposed to everyone this project of a performance-based video program that was then really liked by Art Encounters, and it was invited to be a collateral event of the Art Encounters Biennial. And so for the first time in Romania's history, 6 galleries got together and built something together. And it was functional enough. You know, 2 of us did most of the work, 2 more did some of the work, 2 didn't do anything but lent their like cool names to it, you know, a typical working group.
Mm-hmm.
And it went really well, and it was really appreciated. And we got to Timișoara, and also there was like a big kind of hype as well, because Timișoara closed down and went under curfew exactly the week that we were there. And we happened to have the one venue that was sort of like more flexible. So all of a sudden we threw the big Art Encounters party, because we had this like closed courtyard, and we just locked the doors, and all the best curators and everybody was there. And so that was the first project, and then that very quickly led to me understanding who my real partners were. And so I started Doi Joi with Daniela Palimariu, who runs Sandwich Gallery. And this is a project that's now in its 3rd year. It has exponentially increased the gallery attendance of the city. We have over 40 galleries that are part of it. So for anyone who doesn't know it, every 2nd Thursday of every month, at least 10 galleries, sometimes 20, do special projects, are open late until 10 p.m. Doi Joi on Instagram. And the website itself is the first ever map of Bucharest's contemporary art galleries. Okay. And so you have a physical map, you have a digital map, you have a program. It's super fun. So then we did that, and we're like, well, this works too. And then, of course, because we're in Romania, there's government support. So we ended up getting the 2nd year and the 3rd year, we were AFCN supported. And that was nice. And then I think I did a few other smaller things, but then the big banger came, and that was the art fair. And again, it was just an idea. I was like, why don't we have an art fair? Let's have an art fair. Nobody's gonna come here for me, but they might come in for in 20. Mm-hmm. And that's essentially how it happened. And I just picked up my phone and I called 20 galleries.
Which you now already had a relationship with. So I'm also seeing how, you know, again, your process is intuitive, but it's also a little bit trial and error, and it builds over time. You know, you did this, you know, one thing, then you did something that was kind of longer term, you know, every month. And now it's this huge art fair, which, you know, 2nd year in a row is having results. And I feel like, yes. And now the art galleries too that are coming, because they're saying, well, no, this is actually something I want to be a part of. So I personally have seen art galleries that I didn't see last year, this year, because they were like, we don't want to miss out, because something interesting has been created that, you know, it's also, you know, hopefully we're going to sell art. Like, that's, you know, at the end of the day.
I love nothing more than the haters, you know, because they're the ones that actually get to do stuff, right? So I think part of the reason I made an art fair was because, well, everybody told me it wouldn't work, right? And so it was really funny because I obviously didn't make the art fair by myself. God forbid, you know, like Daniela is like my main partner in it. There's, you know, 8 other galleries that are like, nothing happens without this group, because everyone brings in different things to it. But I do remember at the beginning when I was calling them, And they were saying, you know, we've tried this before, it doesn't work. There was Art Safari, there's this, there's that, but of course we want it. So yeah, go for it. Let's do it. We're in. And so everybody acquiesced, but when this very like, I hope you understand we're all gonna lose money, right? And they're like, but okay, whatever, it's not that expensive, we'll lose a little money. And so, of course, after the first edition last year, when we could proudly say we sold over 200,000 euros in 4 days, that felt good. So then,
that changes the conversation.
you know, and not only that, because even to this day, so before opening the art fair this year, every kind of like news channel or every interview I was brought to was like, is there really a market in Romania for art, for contemporary art? Like, there is no market. Like, essentially, like the statement was, there is no market. What are you guys doing? And I could say to them, well, fine, but we sold $250,000 of art last year in 4 days. So something's happening.
Yeah, what do you call that? Exactly.
What do you call $630,000 a year too?
Hey, yep.
So again, these are things where a lot of hard work and a lot of people getting together is what gets it done. So, you know, the topic of this was finding your people. Essentially, I can't do this. Like, I can't make an art fair, but I can with 9 other people, you know, and so that really, like, I think really big things come down to that. And I think there's a lot of like conversation around how myself and Daniela are kind of the face of this. And some people like that, some people don't, because obviously everyone wants visibility and everybody wants to be recognized for what they do. But it really is true. It's like, you know, everybody brings a piece without which it's a weaker project. And so my mentality is essentially that, like, as long as the piece that's being brought is positive, it's very welcomed in. And I think that I find it hard to understand or to believe that anyone does anything huge on their own. I don't think it exists. So I think finding your people is very important for that as well. Like, when do you want to be bigger than yourself? Because I'm not the art fair, the 10 of us are. And I want to do these big things.
That's good. Since we only have about 10 minutes left, if there's anyone else who has questions, you can put them in the chat. You can turn on your camera and speak them directly. So we want to make sure that... Sorry?
Which we prefer.
Which we prefer. Yeah, it's good to see people. But please do ask questions about whether it's, you know, completely changing your life around, whether it's recognizing when you've hit a ceiling and need to expand, whether it's gaining the courage to do something that hasn't been done before in a place, or hasn't been done in an exciting way in a place, or in a way that's worked. I think these are all, you know, questions that Catinca is absolutely well qualified to answer. And while people are thinking, maybe just one quick question for Catinca about maybe collectors here in Bucharest, because I know there was a time, again, where people maybe just, you know, weren't so much thinking about, we want to collect Romanian artists. We as Romanians really want to value and support Romanian artists who are working. How do you feel like this collective that you've been fostering maybe has changed that a bit?
I think there's a lot an artist can do with some time, money, and encouragement. And so the collective, I mean, look, the fair wasn't built from ground zero, right? Like, the things started being built here, starting with essentially 2000, 2001, 2002 is when the first private galleries started coming in. So there was a lot of foundational work that had to exist before this could happen. You know, I was a catalyst to it happening because already so many things had happened to make it possible. And so all of a sudden you have a strong system here, right? You really do have enough galleries for the number of artists, as far as I can tell. I'm not sure an artist would say the same thing, but a good artist probably would. Apologies to those who are not represented. I hope you find a gallery who meets your needs. But there's a system in place, and I think it's important to remember that Romania, for as small of a country as it is, really has a huge participation internationally. So not only are there 4 galleries in Basel, which is the most important art fair conglomerate in the world, but there's like another 10 in the next tier of art fairs. And so this is what supports artists, right? What supports artists is someone believing in them, offering some financial assistance, offering strategic assistance, and helping them kind of get more visibility and get into places. So then all of a sudden, when you do this collectively and you provide a platform onto which not only your gallery and their little system sees you, but the entire national system and some international see you, you can grow much faster, right? Like we this year brought 31 curators from 11 countries to Bucharest. That's 31 people who saw all of the artists that were being presented and who went home extremely happy. It was one of our most successful programs, actually, the curatorial program. And so the artists benefit from this. Everybody benefits. It's an ecosystem, right? Because the artists benefit because they get more money, encouragement, visibility. The gallerists benefit because they obviously grow their businesses, get to better support the artists, get to meet the curators and the collectors of others. And the collectors really benefit because it creates a system for them. And so all of a sudden you put collectors together, they start creating a community, they start to talk, all of a sudden more artists are getting more attention because they're like, well, if that guy's got it, I want it too. And so I think to better answer your question, an ecosystem is what supports artists. So not just the collective that I helped build and I am a part of, but also the ecosystem around this entire collective that the collective itself is responsible for.
Yeah, I think that's really, really good, because I think that's often overlooked too. It's not just, you and your colleagues who are building something together. It's also, the customers, the collectors who interact in interesting and different ways and can influence the ecosystem in important ways. And I feel like this has applicability in so many different markets. I mean, everything you're saying, I feel like resonates so much with Romanian literature and translation as well. That is an ecosystem with booksellers, translators, some government funding as well, the writers, everyone's kind of involved. And, we have the Bucharest Book Fair, just starting today. And I'm curious to see, how it evolves. But I absolutely agree with you. It can't evolve unless every piece of the puzzle is really being looked at and paid attention to. Yeah. I did see a question from Simona.
What kind of personal, go ahead, you read
No,
it.
please.
No, you read it.
Okay. What kind of personal, concrete advice would you give to students needing or willing to change their career paths once, twice, or even more? What or who can support their fluid idea, their confusions, their indirections? And through indirections, you will find directions, are great Will once said. So yes, great question.
I would say just do it. YOLO. I'm not being funny. I'm not being vague. I'm not being too short. It really is that simple. Everything else is hard, right? It's scary. It feels destabilizing. But nothing bad will come out of it. I think if you just remember that if your entire being is yelling to do something else, that's the right voice to listen to. It's so, and you know what? I was about to say it's so easy to stay in what's safe. It's not so easy, right? It feels like shit. Right? If it feels like you're dying inside, if you're just staying with what's safe because you think this is where I need to be. If you have a personality that safety is what matters, you'll feel like that's the right thing. But just do it is really the only mentality if you want to change. Like it's unlikely to be easy or quick. And so there's a process they have to be prepared for. I don't know how many of you guys have ever changed like cities or countries. You know how hard those first months are, but you also know that they pass. So if any of you guys have not ever migrated from your city or your country, I mean, I spent my first 6 months in Romania on an airplane going somewhere else and hiding out in my apartment. And I was like, oh my God, Romania is so nice. And one of my parents, I forget which one, was like, Romania is not your apartment. But I didn't have friends and I didn't know where to go and I didn't have anything, right? And I think that's true for anything. The beginning is tough. But so what? It's
Yeah, I think that's really good when you're kind of considering, as hard as it might be to change, staying in the long run definitely is harder. I will also point out something that I remember from your story, Catinca, is, you were aware of your resources. And I think that people need to be aware of their resources. And, they might think like, oh my gosh, I need to have like 2 years salary, saved up in order to do something different. But that's not actually true, but you have to, for you, what's going to be enough that you can wait out those, or work through those, first like 6 months. But then, having the faith that if you really feel like you need to move in that direction, that it will be rewarded.
I think so. And I don't think we need to discredit the financial need. Like, I do think that if you decide that you want to change and you're not financially ready to do so, there's nothing wrong with spending the next 6 months to a year getting yourself financially ready to do so. Life does require time and sacrifice. My last year in New York, I wasn't uber happy. I wasn't like, yay, I'm doing what I need to do. But I also wasn't, I wasn't ready to leave. Like it wasn't prepared. The system of my life wasn't prepared. And I think recognizing that you need change might come earlier than the moment you can make that change. Just don't wait too long because, then I don't know. I guess you could, but why?
You lose momentum, and also why. That's good. Well, Catinca, thank you so much for sharing your experiences, sharing your wisdom with us. And we're so happy to have you here in Bucharest, creating this energy, making it more a place that people want to stay. So we're so grateful. And thank you to the Romanian American University. Thank you to Simona and the American Studies Center. Thank you also to Cristi for tech support. And for the Romanian American University students, in the chat, you have a link to fill out the attendance form so that you get credit for attending if you need it. And also, we just love to get feedback from you. So please do fill out the form, but I will have Catinca sign off. Thank you again so much for giving of your time and sharing your story with us.
Thank you so much for having me and for the invitation. It was great fun to dialogue and to talk about all this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Catinca, from the part of the Center for American Studies for coming here. I hope you join us again in the future and maybe even in person one day. Have a wonderful evening. Bye-bye.